Blessings, beloveds. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer, with you guys again today. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you so much again for taking the time to watch my videos. And again, I hope you're all learning new things. That's obviously the intention and the purpose, to bring more awareness to people so that people can have, a better understanding of themselves and their life and their purpose and so forth. So today's video is really drawing from esoteric astrology again, but I was thinking about this, and I was thinking that whether you are learning esoteric astrology or exoteric astrology, the two really work together. We can't actually separate them. In fact, I think it's important and a lot wiser to actually understand both and to unify both of them, really. The reason I say that is because I would think that, the majority of people, if not all, that are born in each incarnation, no one is born in experiencing and understanding their life purely from that esoteric level. We're born into the exoteric level, and we evolve. We create, greater awareness, greater insight about ourselves and our life and our purpose, and that can be obtained through exoteric and esoteric, but I think it's important to marry the two. So what I want to focus on today is exactly that, the unification of the soul and the personality. And more specifically, what I want to discuss today is when you are looking at the ascendant, if you have an aspect from the sun, your sun sign, to your ascendant sign, depending on the nature of that aspect and what that aspect describes and signifies, that really starts to show you how you are actually able to, and how you are working on, and what the challenges are, if any, or resistances in relation to unifying the soul and the personality. Because in esoteric astrology, the ascendant, the rising sign, which is the sign rising on the eastern horizon at your birth, it's where the sun rises as well. It's a very, very powerful point, that eastern horizon point. And every morning that the zodiac travels through that point, and that's why we get different rising signs every couple of hours. Now that changes in terms of the speed of the signs depending on whether we're in the southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere. There are faster and slower rising signs in the southern hemisphere, and there are faster and slower rising signs in the northern hemisphere. So if the ascendant represents the soul, which I believe it does, and as I've said before, so do other things such as Pluto, such as the three water houses. They all connect to the soul as well. But let's just stick to the ascendant sign for today. Have a look at your ascendant, and have a look at if the sun in your birth chart has an aspect to your ascendant. And if it does, what is that aspect? What is the nature of that aspect? So the soul is the ascendant, the sun is your personality, and the whole purpose of our journey and how that unfolds is very intricately related to the relationship between your ascendant, your soul, and the sun, your personality. So for instance, if you have a square aspect from your sun sign to your ascendant, the square aspect is 90 degrees, so it's 3 signs from one point to the other. The square aspect is a hard dynamic aspect. It is an aspect that can bring resistance and tension and conflict as well. So if you had your sun squaring your ascendant, then it would be fair to suggest that the personality component of who you are and the soul aspect of who you are at cross purposes. There's a resistance with the personality allowing the soul to come through, to integrate. And that can describe the difficulty that one might have in a particular incarnation when it comes to unifying the soul and the personality. So with the square aspect, you could say that the personality is very dominant and is really coloring everything in this person's life. And the unification of allowing the soul to come through is very difficult. There's a lot of resistance from the personality level. Now, there are over 25 aspects or so, okay, in a chart that we can assess, and there are 17 or 18 of those that are quite obscure or uncommon aspects, as they are known as well, and they describe very specific themes and characteristics and so forth. But for the purposes of today, what I really want us to focus on are you could say the Ptolemaic aspects, and I might add a few more. So more or less the traditional aspects is what I'm trying to say. So we would be looking at the conjunction. So if the Sun is conjunct the Ascendant, that's a very, very important conjunction. You know, that means you were born literally while the Sun was ascending, rising. So you would have the Sun and the Ascendant in the same sign, right? Because the Sun is rising on the eastern horizon. So whatever sign the Sun is in, the Ascendant sign is going to be in that same sign. So there's some very special, I think, very important connection, very powerful expression and manifestation and statement about the person regarding their soul energy and their personality energy, because they are in the same sign. The Sun and the Ascendant in the same sign means that the person's soul energy and the person's personality, persona energy are in the one sign. So that's got to be a very important statement. So with the conjunction, I would use a 10 to 12 degree orb. Now, you know, people have different opinions on that. Some people might use up to an 8 degree orb. Some people might use up to 10. Certainly up to 8 is more than reasonable. And I think it's, when it comes to the conjunction aspect, we can extend that up to about 12 degrees. Sometimes it depends, and we need to assess what it is we're looking at, whether it's, are we looking at two planets forming a conjunction? Are we looking at a planet on an angle, such as the Ascendant, as we're discussing today, or the midheaven, the top of your chart, bottom of your chart, the IC, or the descendant? There is also something that's very important to understand when it comes to aspects, known as applying aspects and separating aspects. Applying aspects are a lot more potent, a lot more loaded with energy, and separating aspects are still very powerful, still active, still manifesting and expressing, but there is a less intensity of the energy, you could say, because what has happened with an applying aspect, what we're seeing is we're seeing 2 points coming together in application. So they are moving towards each other. That's an applying aspect. If we are looking at a separating aspect, then what we are looking at is 2 points have already come together. They've formed that conjunction. They're standing side by side, and the faster moving body out of the two is now starting to separate. It's starting to move away from being in that exact conjunction point. So that is a separating aspect. And an applying aspect, as I said, is, well, either the two have arrived or they are very, very in very close proximity to arriving to that exact conjunction. So there is a distinction and a difference with applying and separating aspects. That is something important to understand and to learn and to integrate in your understanding of astrology, because when you are looking at your birth chart or any birth chart, you need to be noticing these very, you could say, technical components, because they have great meaning behind them. So getting back to the aspects, with regards to the sun aspecting your ascendant, if indeed that is the case, because it may very well be that the sun is not aspecting your ascendant, at least in the main category of the traditional common aspects, which is the conjunction, the opposition, the square. I will throw in the quincunx, which is not a traditional aspect necessarily, but it is a very powerful aspect. Let me just go back and start again. So the conjunction is anywhere from 0 degrees up to 10 degrees in terms of the orb. It's 0 degrees because it's literally two bodies coming together. It's the starting point. It's the energy being born. Another way of saying it is that it's an Aries point. It's an Aries energy. And where is Aries in the zodiac? It begins at 0 degrees. So when 2 points are conjunct each other, they hold that vibration, that archetypal force of the energy expression, which is loaded with power. The opposition, which is 180 degrees. So in the example that we're using today with the sun and the ascendant, what you would see there is you would look at your ascendant, and if there is an opposition, then clearly your sun will be on the descendant, right? Because the descendant is the exact opposite point of the ascendant. I'll bring up a chart in a moment just to show one aspect, or we could probably run through a few. I could just animate the chart and flick around. So the opposition, as I said, is 180 degrees, so it's literally opposite. So therefore, that would imply that the person was born, sometime in the late afternoon, early evening, depending on the month of the year we're talking about, such as summer, winter, etc. And naturally, depending on which part of the hemisphere we're talking about as well, because the sun rises and sets different times in different parts of the world with the different seasons and so forth. But generally speaking, when you have the sun on the descendant, that would mean you were born late afternoon, early evening, say 6 o'clock, just to keep it very simple. And that has a pretty significant expression as well in terms of the relationship between the ascendant and the sun. There is a direct relationship there. It is an opposition, but it is a very powerful relationship. So that would be describing the integration process of the soul and the personality. Now, I think when you have the sun on the ascendant, so when you have a conjunction between the ascendant and the sun, and when you have an opposition, so the sun is on the descendant in the 7th house, that's clearly drawing in the relationship access. Now, this is more of an exoteric view, but I think it's very important to integrate and to understand, because anybody who has a sun on the ascendant or descendant, their life is very important, very much expressed through their relationships. It's a very central component to their development and growth and evolution, really. Now, the square aspect, which is 90 degrees, I would allow an 8 to 10 degree orb, and in addition with the opposition, an 8 to 10 degree orb as well. Those three aspects, the conjunction, square, and opposition, are considered hard aspects, although the conjunction really has the element of soft and hard, simply because it is an energy that can really manifest in a multiple different layers and levels. So it can be difficult, but it can be incredibly empowering as well. The quincunx, as I said, is not a traditional aspect necessarily, but I would consider that if I was assessing the relationship between the Sun and the Ascendant, if there was a quincunx there. That is known as a hard aspect, so that would have some challenges and difficulties with regards to aligning the soul and the personality. Now, allow me just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that if you have a hard aspect between your Sun and your Ascendant, that you cannot align your personality with your soul. I'm merely pointing out that whatever aspect you have with the Ascendant and the Sun, it would color and it would describe and it would speak to the pathway relating to marrying the Sun personality and soul, and how that might be challenging, how that might be difficult, how there might be resistance there, or on a positive level in terms of soft aspects, how that can just be experienced in a sense of flow and ease and harmony. And that leads me to the soft aspects. So when it comes to the soft aspects, we are talking about the trine, which is 120 degrees distance between the Ascendant and your Sun would need to be 120 degrees apart in order for this trine to be there. The trine aspect, I would also allow between 8 to 10 degrees in terms of an orb. The trine aspect would imply that the soul and the personality are really in absolute harmonious essence together. There is an absolute harmony between the soul and the personality unifying and working together with an ease and a flow in terms of the person's evolution in their incarnation. The same, and I would, as I said, 8 to 10 degrees orb. The next soft aspect I would consider would be the sextile aspect, which is 60 degrees, so it's half of the 120. A sextile aspect is a very powerful aspect as well. Never underestimate it. I would allow from anywhere from 3 to 6 degree orb. That is the Sun sextiling your Ascendant. That is also a soft aspect. Very similar vibration and energy to the trine aspect. So it has that ease and flow to it again. You could also add in there the semi-sextile. Now we're starting to sort of head out to the more uncommon aspects, if you like. So the semi-sextile is 30 degrees, so that's one sign apart. And I would have a very small orb for that, 2 to 5 degrees, 5 maximum. Semi-square you can throw in as well, which is 45 degrees, and that's a hard aspect. That's half of the square aspect. So half of 90 is 45, right? So these aspects that I've just mentioned are the aspects that I always look at when I'm looking at a person's chart, including my own chart. And there are, as I said, there are about another 17 different aspects that are more obscure and uncommon. However, I do pay attention to them, particularly the quintile, septile, sometimes the novile. Now, they are more advanced sort of aspects to work with in astrology, so don't worry about those necessarily unless you are already working with them. But in terms of this either resistance, challenge, or cross purposes with the soul and the personality, really pay attention to the conjunction, square, opposition, or quincunx, perhaps even semi-square. And in terms of the natural ease and flow of the person feeling like their soul and their personality are really at one. They are working harmoniously together, so there's no conflict there. Then you'd be looking at the trine, sextile, and semi-sextile aspect. So that's really what I wanted to just briefly discuss today, it is really important, and it can be very powerful in helping you understand some inherent components to how your personality and soul are integrating, uh, and what the challenges might be or resistances based on the hard aspects. And certainly, if you are feeling, a more ease and flow with your soul and personality, one way, this is just one way, one way it can be reflected is through the angle, the distance between the Sun and the Ascendant, and what relationship they have to each other. Um, there's more to this, but this is just an introduction to get you thinking about this relationship between the Sun and the Ascendant, mainly from an esoteric level, because in exoteric astrology, the Ascendant is not viewed as the soul. It is in esoteric that it is viewed as the soul. But as I said at the beginning of this video, I think it's really important to have a really strong foundation in exoteric astrology. And if you're interested in esoteric astrology, it's not about disregarding exoteric astrology at all. It's really about marrying the two, which is the fundamental core essence of esoteric astrology. It's aligning personality and the soul. And as I've mentioned in previous videos as well, that journey that involves numerous initiations, really, it's a journey. It's literally a journey. It's your path of evolution, and it may not necessarily happen in just one incarnation. I don't think it does. Unless you are a Buddha or a Krishna or a Christ, those souls really were operating from that esoteric soul level. They had transcended and evolved clearly so far ahead than you could say, every single other human being, really, because how many Christs or Buddhas or Krishnas have we had? There are some other souls that would be very high on the spectrum of operating from that esoteric soul level, like the Dalai Lama, for example. Krishnamurti, I would throw him in there as somebody who was quite awakened. There are many, many others, but, in terms of key figures in our history and the teachings that they brought to humanity to expand people's consciousness are the sort of main ones that I've, shared already. So there's something for you to perhaps consider or think about if you haven't. If you don't have an aspect, one of those major aspects between the Sun and the Ascendant, that doesn't mean that you're not, you're not on the path, you're not unifying the soul and the personality. Of course you are. Of course we all are. It's just that everyone's at a different point of evolution or difference on a different spectrum with that experience and that part of their evolution, and what sort of initiations present to each of us. But I think if there is a relationship between the Sun and the Ascendant, then there's, you could say, a greater emphasis on the importance of balancing and integrating that very important relationship between the two. And again, as I've said in previous videos, it usually happens, later in life for the majority of people. It's, in this 3D physical domain, the majority of us are really led by our personality for the first half of life. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of our evolution and our growth and development and the experiences that we need to have in order to evolve, in higher planes, in order to get closer to that soul component of who we are. And planetary cycles such as, Saturn return, Uranus opposite Uranus, Neptune square Neptune, Pluto square Pluto. The secondary progressed lunation cycle, which coincides very closely with the Saturn cycle at around about, well, Saturn return, the first Saturn return is at the age of 29, thereabouts, and the secondary progressed lunation cycle trails behind it. It's at around about 27 and a half, 28 years of age. So these are cycles that are represented at different junctures in our life are incredibly synced with our the opportunity for us to unify this personality and soul relationship. You know, every time these cycles present at the different junctures, different ages in life, they are always presenting us with the ability and opportunity to expand our consciousness, to break away from the known, as Jeffrey Wolf Green would say, the known being the conditioned responses and beliefs and patterns of behavior that are integrated into our psyche, not only from this present life, but from many incarnations. So Uranus transits really always pertain to liberating us, liberating our soul, liberating our personality from breaking away from the chains of constrictions, limitations, and the resistances. So these planetary cycles that come through at various stages in life are really very, very powerful in the assistance of the integration of our soul and personality. And as I said, you know, it usually starts to happen. People get a glimpse at around about the age of 29, just a glimpse really. And then at around about 35, pretty important cycles kick in that really shake the world as we see it for our own self, where we stand and everything we thought we were or thought the world was, you know. So there's huge transformations that take place, and all of these are always about this deeper connection and understanding of the soul and the personality. And one window of understanding it is what I've discussed today in relation to the Sun and the Ascendant and the relationship between them. So I'll leave that there for you guys. Just actually, before I do, I'll just share my screen and just show you something. It's not of anybody's chart. It's actually a chart for today that I just drew up, just to demonstrate a visual example of the Sun being square the Ascendant. So if you look up here, you can see this is today's date, and it's drawn for the for 1:21 p.m. in Melbourne. So somebody was, you know, probably born at this time today, and this is what their chart would look like. So the Sun's at 26 degrees of Sagittarius, which places it right on the midheaven. It's a very powerful Sun, that one. And if you look over here to the left-hand side, which is the Ascendant rising sign, you can see that the Ascendant, I've just drawn it at 27 degrees of Pisces. So Pisces to Sagittarius creates a square aspect. As Sagittarius to Virgo, if we go over to the other side of the chart, the descendant, where the Sun sets, Virgo is also square to Sagittarius, okay? And Pisces is opposite to Virgo, and Virgo is opposite to Pisces. So in fact, really this chart, that this person has the Sun square the Ascendant, which is describing the connection, relationship, integration, and challenges of the person's personality and soul. And on another level, it's squaring the descendant. So it's describing a lot about that person's relationship life as well. The whole domain of relationships is really linked up to this person's Sun in Sagittarius. So there's a couple of layers and levels of understanding this, but just sticking to the Sun and the Ascendant, here's an example of the sun being square the ascendant. Now, if this person was born at around about midnight, and therefore the sun, well, no, that's not going to work because that would place the sun in. Okay, disregard that comment. Another way of saying what I was about to say is that pretend that the sun was in Gemini, just down here, because the person was born at midnight, which would place the sun at the bottom part of the chart. So a very easy way of kind of getting familiar with the chart as well is just remembering that the ascendant always represents sunrise. The midheaven represents the middle of the day. It's when the sun is right at its zenith point in the sky, so it's around about lunchtime. The right-hand side of the chart, which is the 7th house, that you see the sun there, then you know someone was born, as I said, around about 6 p.m. And if you see the sun down here at the bottom of the chart, the nadir point, as it's called as well, I see, that means the person was born close to midnight, around there. So if a person was born at midnight, again, they would have their sun possibly squaring their ascendant. It's not always the case. You need to measure the distance. This is where you need to know your basics, the astrological degrees from 0 right through to 360. So, okay, there was a visual example for you. I'll leave that there. And see you guys soon. I hope you got to watch my video on the full moon in Cancer. I hope you've enjoyed that. It was more of an esoteric kind of take on things. And I'll be back soon. I'll try and do another video before this year is out. I'll see how I go. I have a few things to attend to, such as people's chart readings specifically. So, you know, that's important, but I will try and do maybe one more video before the year is out. Again, wishing you guys a beautiful Christmas and holidays, and take care of yourselves and each other, and love and blessings, and see you soon. Bye.